everybody, it's me, Miss Rowe, and I hope you're having an awesome day and an even awesomer week, and I'm excited to share with you the art project that we're going to be working on today. So this is kind of what it looks like, and it's really cool is that there's two different components to it that I'm personally excited about. One is what it's made out of, and basically it's like a marker painting. So it's really great for those that don't maybe have watercolors or other paints at home, but have markers, water, and a brush. I'll show you the process. It's actually pretty straightforward. The second part of this project that I think is pretty cool is that basically it's like a shadow drawing. So I took two different objects. I took two different plants, but you can use whatever you want, and I took a flashlight and I shined the shadow onto my white paper, and I basically traced some of the shadow that it made. And I actually did that two different times with two different objects for each one, and it kind of created this really cool abstract effect that I really enjoyed. So again, but if you like the technique, you can do it. You don't have to do a shadow drawing, or you could do a shadow drawing with other materials. Either way, I hope you enjoy the video. And also, before I go, for those of you that have submitted work to either the Google form, or just to my email, I would like to say thank you. The work has been amazing. And also, if I haven't responded to your email, I'm very sorry. I've been getting a lot of emails with all the different submissions. That's been getting kind of hard to respond to every single one, but I want you to know that I see them. I'm saving them for the art celebration video, and not to worry. If I have any questions, I'll email you about it. But again, thank you for the submissions. They've been great. And even if you already sent me a submission, I would still love for you to send me a picture of whatever you come up with today, just because I miss you all so much. It'd be nice to get a little something. So anyway, I hope you enjoy the video. Bye.
Okay, so in terms of materials you're going to need, you'll want to get a piece of paper. The thicker the paper, the better. If you have cardstock or watercolor paper or mixed media paper, that would be best. You're also going to need some washable markers. That I accidentally had them on the wrong side, that's why you can't see the colors. But basically any Crayola markers would work. They just have to be washable. You're also probably going to want a flashlight. You could also use a phone as well, as long as it has a flashlight feature too. But since I'm recording on my phone, I'm using a flashlight. You'll also want a paintbrush. If you have one that's got more of a pointed tip, that's better. A Sharpie, not a black marker or a Sharpie. It has to be permanent. And then you're also going to want to get a pencil and an eraser, of course. You'll also want to get your hands on a little glass of water. You don't need too much. And also some paper towels, just because you're going to need to clean off your brush in between colors that you're using. And you'll also want to grab some objects that you think would be good for your shadow part. For this next part, I'm showing you how you can kind of play with the different shadows of whatever object you're using. I chose to use a little flower pot just because I kind of like the shapes that they make. And I'm showing you with my flashlight what you could do. So I have my paper set up pretty high, but you could always put your paper on the ground and then use your flashlight in a different way. I just thought this way would be easiest to show you. But basically, if you move your flashlight around, closer away, further away, if you angle it going down or angle it going up, then that kind of changes how the shadow will look on your paper. So basically, you just want to find a shadow that you like and be able to have your flashlight support that shadow and stay still so you can actually trace it. So again, I'm showing you it this way with my paper facing upwards like that, but usually you'd probably want to have it facing down, like laying on a table. So once you find a shadow that you like, all you have to do is just trace it with a pencil. It's pretty straightforward. Just do your very best. If it's not perfect, it's not a big deal. I put my flashlight on a few different boxes to be able to support it because I was working on my island in my kitchen. So you could do that, or if you have someone that's willing to help you, you could ask them to maybe hold the flashlight for you, or you can maybe put the flashlight on a table. It's really up to you. You can kind of play around with it to see the best way that would work for you. And again, I'm using flowers and different plants for this one, and I also use that in my example as well. But you can use whatever object that you think just has a really cool silhouette or an outline to it that you think would be interesting. So I'm just using flowers because I just thought they would create kind of a cool abstract shadow, but it's really up to you and whatever you have available or what interests you. So after I finished tracing, this is what it looked like. So at this point, you could just go ahead and continue the project with just one tracing of a shadow. But if you want, you can actually get another object and do a second tracing. I found this other plant that I had in the house that I thought would create some fun shadows. So I played around with the lighting and how it would look. And I tried to, think about how it would look on top of the tracing that I had already done of my other shadow. And I just decided to outline this one as well. I just thought it would add an extra layer of interest to it, make it look a little bit more complicated. But again, this is a completely optional step. You could just stop after one shadow if you wanted to. After I was done with the second tracing, this is what it looked like with them layered on top of each other. And I thought that looked pretty cool, so I decided to keep it that way and move on to the next step. Basically, the next step is just looking at how all of the pencil lines are, how they are arranged, if you like them. Chances are you could really like how it looks, but in my opinion, for at least my piece, I thought that I would want to add just a little bit extra in some of the areas that were a bit empty. Because again, it's a shadow drawing, but it is, as I said earlier, kind of abstract. So it's like no one's really going to know if you add anything or if you take away a part that you don't like. So this is kind of like the editing process. So I decided to add one or two other extra little shadow areas where there was just area that I didn't think was very interesting. Once you're happy with how your pencil lines look, then the next step is to take your Sharpie. Again, it needs to be a permanent marker, and just go over all of your lines. Just take your time and try to be as steady as you can. So I cut to after I'd already finished doing all the lines. So the next step for this is to just get out your eraser, and if you see any stray pencil lines, which again is probably going to be there because when you're tracing a shadow, sometimes you can accidentally slip a little bit or the shadow moves. Either way, just go ahead and make sure you erase all your pencil marks as gently as possible. After you're done erasing, the next step is to get out your markers. These are actually a new box that I got, so I'm pretty excited about it. Again, the washable markers, and you want to pick out a few colors that you think would look good together. So for my piece, I chose 4 colors. I would try to do more than 3, but I mean, you could even do a rainbow if you wanted to. It's up to you. When you're choosing your colors, think about choosing maybe some that are dark and maybe some that are light. But again, it's just as long as you like how they look together, then that's really the most important part. So these were the ones that I chose. And yes, I even decided to choose a black one just because I want to show you what a black washable marker looks like when you add water to it. But also I just thought that it could kind of go nicely with the other colors that I chose. Once you've gotten all your colors picked, you want to go ahead and pick your first color and again decide on the areas where you want to color it in. So basically what you want to do is outline the inner parts from that Sharpie line of the area that you want to be that color, as you can see that I'm doing here. If you ever come across a shape that you are trying to fill in and it has a tinier shape inside of it, which will probably happen because of just how shadows are, you want to make sure that you outline the outside of that tinier shape as well, as you'll see me do in a minute. So again, I outlined around there, and I also just finished outlining around all the other areas too. If you're wondering about why I'm doing this and why I'm outlining the inner part of this area, it's basically because we are using the marker for its ink, for its color. So again, since I want that whole area to be that nice magenta color, by outlining the inner lines of that area, I'm basically providing ink to use later when I come back in and I add water, and it's going to basically dilute the ink from the marker, and it's going to spread it around and kind of create a cool watercolor effect. So that's why you're adding in that marker. One thing to keep in mind is that the more marker you add, or the thicker of lines that you do, the more ink you'll have to be able to use later. So if you want an area to be very saturated or be very dark, then you want to add even more marker. But if you want to be very, very light, then you can just go over your lines once. This is just a suggestion, but for me, I thought that it looked pretty interesting when I didn't put the same colors right next to each other. Basically, you can think about the Sharpie lines as sort of like a dividing line, because the Sharpie is permanent, it's not washable, so it won't be affected by the water we're going to add later. So it acts as kind of a barrier between the different colors. So again, you can do it however you would like, but I just personally chose to not have the same colors right next to each other. Also, if you come across a really tiny area, kind of like the area I'm filling in right now, just fill it all in with marker. You don't have to worry about making this really teeny tiny outline along that part. It's just not really worth it. So just keep that in mind. If you come across a really tiny area, just fill it in with marker. Like I mentioned earlier with making some of your lines a bit thicker for your outlines, you want to think about that too if you're working with a really big area. So if you're working with a very large area, you're probably going to want to just thicken up those outlines anyway, just because you're going to need more ink to fill in that area. And you can kind of see me doing that with this blue area that you see here. So when you move on to some of the tinier areas that are overlapping other areas, you can, of course, choose to use all the different colors and not really have a system of how you want to color it. But personally, I thought it would be kind of cool to color in all of those shapes that are intersecting with the blue area green, just because it kind of helps unify the work as a whole. But that's just a suggestion. You don't really have to follow it. I basically just decided that it'd be fun to make my own rules for how I wanted to color this, but it's completely up to you. One important thing I want you guys to know about outlining is that when you are in an area that is kind of going off the page, you want to make sure that you're actually outlining all the way down that border, because you want to just make sure that there's going to be enough ink spread out over in that area. So again, just draw like a straight line all the way down, sort of like you see here. So just keep that in mind as you're working as well. So I decided to skip ahead to basically where I filled in all of the different areas. So as you can see here, I tried to space out my color just so there wouldn't be, an overwhelming amount of one color in one area. But as you can see, no colors are directly touching one another. And I've got all of the border lines done as well. So for the next part, you're going to want your water and your brush and your paper towel. So before you start painting, you want to make sure that you dip your brush in the water and you wipe some of the excess off, because you want to start with just a little bit of water and then gradually add more as you need it. It's a lot easier to add water than to take away water. Keep that in mind. So as you're spreading out some of the water, what you want to do is just kind of like lightly, but again, very carefully go over some of those outlined marker areas, because basically you're trying to dilute some of that marker ink and spread it around to help color in the rest of that shape. As you can see, I'm kind of dabbing the brush. I'm, again, just barely dipping my brush in the water if I need more. And I'm basically just trying to push some of that color around and spread it around. When you're doing this part, one of the most important things is to be careful about not going past that Sharpie line point, because if you do that, then you might accidentally hit the color that's in the area next to it, in which case your colors are going to start mixing together, which, if that's something that you want to experiment with and try, then be my guest, but just keep that in mind when you're doing this. I would also suggest that you should just kind of finish filling in all of that one color that you started with. So for example, I started with the magenta and now I'm just filling in all of the magenta areas because that color is already on your brush. So it just makes the most sense to just finish that up before you clean your brush. So my suggestion after you're done is to start working on another area that is not directly next to the color you just did. Basically, I decided to do the green next, which I've kind of just skipped to because you want to give some of your work time to dry in between. So since I worked on the magenta, I decided not to do the blue or the black since that directly is touching the magenta. So I decided to work on the green next. After that, I would give a little bit of dry time in between that as well. Again, it doesn't really need that much time. And then you can start working on your next color. So again, I decided to start working on the blue. And again, I'm pushing the color, but I'm being very careful to not go outside of that Sharpie line. So for time purposes, and because I feel like you guys are getting the hang of this, I decided to skip to after I finished all of the blue area. And I also gave it some time to dry. So now I'm going to start working on the black area in between. And one of the reasons why I chose to do the black area is because I wanted you to see kind of what black washable marker looks like when you dilute it with water, because it's not going to really turn into like a perfect gray or a perfect black. It's going to be a little on like the greenish bluish side, depending on the brand that you get. But I think it still kind of looks cool, so I just decided that I would use it for my example. Keep in mind that the black areas especially are some of the largest open parts in my entire piece, so I really had to draw in a lot of thick outlines to make sure that I had enough ink for this area because, again, it's just such a large area to cover. So one of the points that I made earlier, I just want to reiterate again because it's so important. You want to start using less water at first and then gradually add more water. And again, the reason that I'm saying that is because if you add too much water at one time, it can start seriously warping your paper, which makes it more difficult to paint on. Depending on the paper that you get, if you have, for example, really nice watercolor paper, it won't be as big of a problem for you. But if you're working on like printer paper or just thinner paper in general, it's a really good idea to try to use as little water as possible to do this. Like I said, you can always add more water, but it's a lot harder to take it away. And once your paper starts warping, all you can really do is kind of let it dry and then try to flatten the paper to be able to fix that problem. So just keep that in mind as you're working. Another fun idea that I had is if you want to, you can always try mixing some of your marker colors together just for fun, just to see what happens. This is kind of a cool project to experiment with. Once you have finished painting your work, congratulations, you now have a very cool shadow marker painting. And I suggest just trying to turn it and see how it looks in different ways because, again, sometimes when you flip it upside down, it looks even cooler. That's one of the best parts, in my opinion, about abstract art, is it's just enjoyable to see from a lot of different angles. This was my example that you saw earlier. So, again, putting it side by side, you can kind of see how different colors were able to kind of give it a different effect. So, again, keep that in mind. Try turning it around. I would absolutely love to see what you guys came up with. Please send it to me, even if it's not for the video. I just miss all of you, and I would love to be able to see something from you guys. So I'll see you next week. Bye.